Welcome to Redefining Engagement. I'm Francesca Dumas, Director of Audience Development and Strategy at Contribly. And in this show, I speak to leaders and innovators in the media industry so that we can bring tips, wisdom, ideas, and even some things to avoid so that we can all do more engagement better. So without further ado, let's move on to our next guest. Hi, Julia.
Hi there.
How are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for joining me to talk a bit about all things engagement. I'm really looking forward to our chat, especially because I know that the Daily Maverick and your teams have done so much in that area. How about we start off with a tiny intro? Please introduce yourself and tell me a bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Julia Harris. I'm the head of reader revenue at Daily Maverick. I've been at Daily Maverick for 3.5 years now. It feels both longer and shorter, but I've spent considerably more time in the publishing industry. Initially working sort of in editorial before moving over to commercial. I've worked I'm from South Africa, but I've worked in the US with Athletic. I've also worked with a couple of other subscription publishers before, moving to Daily Maverick, where my focus has been on membership. So I oversee Maverick Insider, our membership program, as well as sort of all stages of the reader funnel.
That's really interesting to go from the editorial part to commercial, because I guess sometimes it feels like there's a divide, or they work in silos and they don't necessarily always understand each other. And I know I'm generalizing. How did you find that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the things that's helped me to be successful is having that editorial background, understanding a little bit more about how the editorial team thinks, what their priorities are, how they work. I think it's essential. The two, editorial and commercial, your organization's going to be most successful when those two groups are working well together. So if you don't understand each other, you're talking past each other, then you're always going to have friction and you're not going to achieve the level of success you're looking for. So yeah, I would sort of encourage everyone to sort of try both sides of the aisle at some point.
Absolutely. And how about we start off, I guess the easiest slash hardest question, which is the one that we're exploring today, is what is audience engagement? What does that mean to you?
It's obviously a very broad topic. I think for me, audience engagement is sort of any interaction with a Daily Maverick product. So that's whether that's reading an article, opening a newsletter, downloading an app, or eventually becoming a Maverick Insider member. All of those are sort of audience engagement touch points down at various levels of the funnel.
And is this how you've always defined audience engagement? Has the way that you see it changed over time?
I think that it has. I think part of that is, how you think about audience engagement depends a lot on what your role is. I was previously working at a subscription focused publisher where I looked at basically two engagement touch points. It's like, what are people reading before they subscribe? And then what are subscribers engaging with? And a very narrow focus. Whereas now at Daily Maverick, when you're looking at the full funnel and it's membership, not subscription, there's sort of very different engagement elements that you have to focus on. So I think what audience engagement means will differ from publisher to publisher and person for person, depending on what your role in the team is. And I think that sort of more recently, it's kind of been a bit of an epiphany for me is the importance of engagement. I feel like there can be a lot of focus on acquisition and retention, and engagement can feel a little bit like nice to have. And I guess I'm thinking mainly from a membership perspective. You're always looking at the new members that you're getting in through your acquisition efforts. And then, in terms of retention, payment failures are a huge issue for us. So, if you're not focusing on that, your business is going to be in trouble. And engagement, I feel like, can be that thing that sort of is like the ugly stepchild that people think about when they have time and energy. But really, I think where my thinking has changed is like, you can't afford to do that. Like, engagement is so important. It's so the relationship between engagement and retention is so important that you can't drop the engagement ball. It really is very important.
It sounds like if you're great at the engagement piece, even if you drop other balls elsewhere, it can hold together still. Whereas if you haven't done the engagement piece right, it doesn't matter how much effort you're putting in everywhere else, it could easily create massive havoc in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. And I think especially, from a Daily Maverick perspective, we think of our members as being part of a community. And you can't have a community if you're not engaging with your members in a sort of productive way. So I think that's why, for me, in this role, I've sort of been a community is a group of engaged people who, yes, are maybe, they're supporting us because they believe in Daily Maverick's mission. But the difference between being a member and a member of a community is engagement with Daily Maverick's content, sure, but also our products, our team, and then also with other members. So, yeah, engagement is a really broad thing and I think incredibly important. And you won't always see the effects of a lack of engagement straight away. I think, you know, someone's payment fails, their membership goes on hold, you see that immediately. But a drop in engagement might be something that you see further down the line. A couple of months later, they're not engaging, they don't see the value as much, and then they drop off. And you might not see the relationship as clearly, but it's there, and you will feel the effects eventually.
Tell me, obviously we kind of skipped it. Tell me a bit more about the Daily Maverick, and also specifically, what is the big difference between subscriptions and membership in your world?
So yeah, so Daily Maverick is funded 40% by Maverick Insider, our voluntary membership program, which we're very proud to have, got that far, and it sort of is obviously crucial to our business. I think for us, we see the difference between subscription and membership as subscriptions being quite transactional. You have something I want access to, so I pay you for it. Whereas membership is more of a relationship, there's more of an emotional connection. And that is why engagement is so important. Our members, we talk about the membership community and the importance of that. We have a lot of engagement, and I hope we can chat about it in a bit with our members through a community platform that we've created called Daily Maverick Connect, through various member initiatives. That bond with our members is really important to us. Whereas I think with subscriptions, it is more like you pay every month and that's kind of what you get. A publisher provides the content, you pay for it. That's the agreement, and it sort of ends there. I mean, that is a very simplistic way of looking at it, but we do think of subscriptions as being transactional and membership being more emotional.
And how do you, because you're saying emotional and relationship, like how do you know that's happening? What does that look like?
I think part of it is really high retention rates and engagement with various different initiatives. We've been very lucky to have good retention rates during the sort of 6 years of Maverick Insider. And we do see this, we do a lot of user surveys, getting information on why people become members, why they stay members. And a lot of that is because they believe in our journalism. The top reason why people become members is they want to support Daily Maverick. They think that it's important for South Africa that they do so. So there's a lot of it's very mission driven. But then beyond that, it's about how are we engaging with people? It's creating a relationship that's not just like throwing news articles at people. It's initiatives to get them more actively involved in our journalism and to feel a part of Daily Maverick as a true member.
I love the idea of active involvement. I really personally think that it's the thing that is going to allow our industry to drive forward, is either anything focused, for me at least, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, anything focusing on local that people feel like they can get involved in, or anything where they feel like their tiny action is going to potentially make a bigger difference, is how we're going to keep going, in my opinion. So when you're saying active involvement, what kind of stuff are you doing that's allowing people to actively get involved?
So we've had something called the Maverick Insider Expert Database for quite a while. And what that is that members provide us with their information about expertise that they have. For instance, you're a civil engineer or you're a doctor in a specific field. You provide us with your sort of area of expertise and your details. And then when our editorial team is writing a story that might be relevant, they'll look at the expert database and say, oh, Julia is an environmental lawyer. and they'll contact you and get your information from you, either context for the story, an expert opinion, things like that. And, we've had a lot of insiders who sort of have been quoted in articles and have provided really important information for our stories. So that's one way in which they're sort of actively involved. And then the second, sort of more recent, is we have launched Daily Maverick Connect. What that is our community platform. So we don't need to go into it. I think it's well established. People are there's a bit of a backlash against social media. There's a feeling of, news avoidance, and that news organizations aren't providing the right things for, not meeting their users' needs. And we see sort of building a community and a sort of safe space for our readers to engage with each other as being hugely important for this. So Daily Maverick Connect is a community platform that sort of revolutionized how we engage with our members, because it's not just a relationship where Daily Maverick is engaging with members. Members are actively engaging with members of our team, and they're engaging with each other. So it's a sort of much more holistic sort of way of engaging. And it's super exciting. And one of the ways in which people do that is they provide story ideas and tip-offs. So, for instance, as this speaks to something that you said about local journalism, which is also a big focus for us, is, say there's a power outage in your area, and for a week you haven't had power because the municipality has not been doing their job. Then you go on Daily Maverick Connect and you report this as a problem. You maybe say this has happened frequently. This is sort of, please can someone look into it? And then one of our journalists will look into the issue, hopefully, write a story on it, and then give that feedback to the users. So it's sort of, it's user initiated journalism, and it's very much journalism that's for our readers, because we're actively engaging with the problems in their daily lives. Yeah, that's something we started that, when was it, about August last year. It's still very much a work in progress and a development, but it's hugely exciting.
I just want to add in there, I laughed when you said power outages, not because they're not a serious matter, but because obviously when we tried to record this the first time round, I definitely had a power outage. So it just completely resonated straight away. And it's only since August last year. So you're probably still exploring, what makes your audience tick in this new, safer environment. What do you think the biggest challenges are for that, to build that relationship?
Yeah, I think, look, there are a lot, and we are still very much figuring it out as we go. I think it's understanding, one of the big things is understanding that different people want different things from the platform. We had, what was actually the sort of forebearer to Daily Maverick Connect, is we had this big crowdfunding campaign to get our rugby editor to the Rugby World Cup in 2023. It was this huge project where our members donated money to get him there. And one of the sort of benefits that donors got was we created a Slack channel where all the donors were added with Daily Maverick staff and our rugby writers. And it was this really fun sort of sharing memes and stories and videos, and people loved it. But one of the things that was really interesting that we saw from that was the number of people who joined the channel but didn't ever engage on Slack. They weren't commenting, they weren't, using emojis, anything like that. And we were like, oh, have we missed something here? But then in the survey that we did afterwards, a lot of people said how much they enjoyed the channel, even though they didn't engage with it directly. So there were those super users who just were commenting all the time. And then there were people who never did. And they're both groups are equally important, right? And it's making sure that you're providing that space and understanding that, okay, we have all of these people viewing the content, but not nearly as many actively engaging with it. And, finding the balance between, actually, that's not necessarily the worst thing, as long as they're getting value from it. That's sort of the key. It's not what that engagement is necessarily.
I think in X's term, or the old Twitter, they call it something like lurkers, don't they?
Yeah.
It's almost as in 95% of people on X don't actually ever create any content. But obviously we're not going to compare it to any of those, because we are not in that world, and it's a dirty, dirty place. However, I think the beauty of what we can do as publishers and as news organizations is to allow people to engage and it be a safe space, and then others can see that their peers are doing that. And it's the seeing it that makes you feel just as involved as being part of it. And I guess that's a bit of proof of what you've managed to achieve. Anything else?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you've learned? So people want to engage even if they're not actually contributing. Is there anything else
I
that
think
made you
also,
get to that point?
yeah, I think it's also just having a sort of a breadth of conversations. Different things appeal to different people. Daily Maverick is sort of, hard news and investigations is our bread and butter. So there are naturally going to be discussions around articles that we've written about corruption and politics and that sort of thing. And that is, historically where people engage. So having that space is really important for people to carry on those conversations. But it's also having, one of my favorite discussions was people talking about rediscovering going to the local library and, getting their kids involved with that. And there was this really fun discussion about things that, would never have had a space anywhere else on Daily Maverick. There's also then sort of local community initiatives, like local, regional, different city engagements that we're trying to get going. So it's having or speaking about the weekend's rugby match, everyone getting behind our national team. All of those sort of different touch points are really important to make sure that you are sort of reaching a lot of different people and sort of feeding the different needs that people have.
And people might be coming for that and then ending up on the investigative journalism that they wouldn't have engaged with otherwise, and vice versa, I assume.
Yeah, for sure. So it is. It's again, it's that breadth and having different ways that
Mm.
people can engage from voting on polls, introducing themselves or discussing. We have had sort of ask me anything sessions with journalists. So it's like just a variety of different ways of going about it, and I think it's especially in this early stage, it's experimenting with different formats, different topics, and seeing what resonates with people.
What's resonating at the moment from what you know?
Well, so I mean, I think one thing that has been interesting is finding a sort of way of getting our journalists to engage that's most successful. And what we found, we have some amazing journalists who are just themselves. It's obviously in articles on the site. It's very professional. This is our product. I think on LinkedIn people can be a bit performative. I don't like X at all. And what we found is that it really resonates with people when our journalists are just like average people, and that can be being experts in something. It can also be asking apparently stupid questions about things, it's like we want people to engage with Daily Maverick's team like you would any other person. It's about creating that relationship that's not sort of so formal. It's like we're all part of the same community. So that we're seeing a lot of success with that. But that does come with its challenges. Not everyone on the team is that into either engaging or being very open. Journalists and especially on other social platforms are used to a fair level of abuse. So
Mm.
they're kind of a little bit guarded and don't necessarily want to let themselves, be more sort of who they are on these sort of public platforms. So it's encouraging them that it's a safe space as well as a safe space for our members.
I guess you're trying to build authenticity in a way within that community. Are you moderating all of this content that comes onto the platform? How does that work? Like, how are you making sure it's a safe space?
So one of the things we spent a lot of focus on before we launched Daily Maverick Connect, or DMC as we call it, was an AI moderation tool. We sort of, obviously we're telling people this is a safe space and we've got to deliver on this, and it's really important for us that we do that. So we spent a lot of time and effort, creating AI moderation, getting sort of moderators in our team on board, and we've barely had to use it at all. There's the community has moderated itself, which is a minor miracle. And
Oh,
obviously, as it grows, it becomes harder. But part of that is because it's our members. So these are our most engaged readers, our most loyal readers, and we think, very good people. They've chosen to pay for a service they can get for free. So we think there is something quite good about their characters. And to this point, it's been shown that, people moderate each other, and hopefully that will continue. But yeah, AI moderation tools are sort of what we're relying on a lot because we don't have a big team. So as the discussions grow, we will sort of struggle to have someone with eyeballs on it all the time. So moderation we thought was going to be a huge problem. Thankfully, to this point, it hasn't been.
We support some engagement around debates and stuff, and we've actually found the same thing. And I think the more that I hear the stories, the more that I'm hearing the same thing. When people engage on news brands areas, they tend to have higher quality discussions. At least that's been my experience. And the moderation piece hasn't like, the tools are so important, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily, it's almost our fear driving our product development sometimes more than the reality in a sense.
I think that also one of the key things there is, so we obviously we've previously, and we still do, have comment on articles themselves. And in an effort to improve the engagement on article comments, we opened them. Initially, it was only members who could comment, and then we opened it up to anyone who had a registered account with us could comment. And like, that was often quite a toxic space, and people weren't particularly nice. And sort of the switch to a different platform, I think, has weeded some of that out. But I think one of the biggest things, and we do see this in the comments too, is when journalists engage in the comments or on the platform, people are a lot nicer. And I think part of that is it's very easy to just say horrible things into a vacuum, but when you're actually saying them to a person who you're engaging with, we've thankfully found in our community that sort of takes some of the toxicity out. Obviously, not with everyone, but I do think that, if you humanize it a bit, then our experience, people sort of do step away from that a little bit.
I guess in a sense, comments feel very different, don't they? You'll have an article and it's almost like this blank space where you can lead the conversation wherever you want. Whereas when a journalist is involved, sometimes the conversation is being led in a set. They might be asking a specific question. It's very hard when someone asks you about, I don't know, your experience of taking children to a football match. I'm going into sports just because I think sports is a great community builder. And I loved the example you just gave with the rugby. But when someone's asking a question that's linked to that, it's very hard to then come in completely left wing and be quite attacky when it's not necessarily on topic. So is that what you're doing in DMC, did you say? Is it led conversations? Are you kind of making sure the conversation goes a specific way, or is it just an open forum for anything to happen?
It's a combination of the two. We do have a community manager who creates different discussion threads and tries to get conversations going around different topics. But then members are open to create their own discussions, so we don't limit that. So it's a combination of the two. We definitely don't want to, again, this sort of goes to moderation a little bit. We want to moderate sort of, I don't want to say hate speech, but like sort of toxic behavior, sorry, is a better way of saying it. We want to remove that, but we don't want to dictate what people are going to engage on. It is a space for our members, so it's important that we allow them the freedom to create the discussions that are interesting to them. So it's a balance between the two at the moment.
What is the long-term strategy for this, and how are you measuring success?
There, long term, and this is like this still internal debates about how we should manage it. As I say, at the moment, only members can comment and engage with posts, but non-members can view what's happening on DMC. I think long term for us, we see it as a big acquisition tool, that people will see it as a space that they want to engage with and therefore become members. I think that, yeah, we really see it as a community that will grow and grow beyond just the news. What's really important for us is we have a lot of local journalism initiatives at the moment, and we want to take this beyond even DMC. We want people to start meeting up in their own communities off of engagements that they've had on DMC. If that's starting a run club in your city, or you're doing a community project locally, those are actually sort of the things that we would really love to see DMC sort of spur, is people meeting up beyond just online engagement. So that's kind of one of the elements where we wanted to grow, but obviously just, kind of very engaged quality engagements on the platform itself is sort of the focus.
I can't wait to hear the stories of people having met, potentially even not just meeting to do community things, but maybe someone might, meet their life partner. How cool would that be?
We've definitely had people think there's potential for a dating app, but I think don't know if that's somewhere we want to go with this.
It might just happen organically without you pushing it.
Yeah.
2026 has got me all giddy, clearly. And how are you measuring success at the moment? Obviously, the KPIs, I'm guessing, when you're starting a new project like this. And I know we're not just talking about DMC, with the whole of the Daily Maverick engagement piece isn't where we're going. But when you started it, what were the KPIs that you were hoping to measure?
So I think for, it's active users, engaged users, number of comments, number of threads started. So, but the one that I look at the most is the active users, to sort of see, are we growing, not just the reach, but actually people engaging with the platform too. You know, this is sort of a difficult thing with engagement in general, is there's so many things you can measure, and you can really get stuck sort of figuring out what is
Mm.
important and get caught up looking at too many things. Sort of for everything, I think it's important to sort of find one or two key metrics that you look at, on a daily basis or weekly basis, whatever it might be, and focus on those. And then, there are a lot of other things you can look at that are informative, but you can sort of get overwhelmed quite easily by looking at too much data.
When you say active users, obviously earlier you mentioned the Slack channel and all of these people on it, but not necessarily actively engaging in the conversation. What do you mean by active users when it comes to DMC?
Good point. So active users is people on DMC, not actually engaging. So there's a different engagement metric that we use for that. So looking at those two is the sort of the active users in terms of people visiting DMC, and then the number of people who are engaging. And engaging is commenting or using, reacting to a post, uh, voting in a poll, those sorts of different engagement pieces. So those are the two things that we focus on.
And obviously, maybe we should talk a little bit about tech, because we are in a very fascinating time where every conference you go to talks about AI. Everyone is talking about tech all of the time. What role do you see the tech, the analytics playing in your engagement efforts? Like, where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, look, data has always been very important to Daily Maverick and to our membership efforts. We believe in tracking data, experimenting. We've had huge success, not just in engagement, but with a variety of different initiatives using data. And it's actually something that we're sort of doubling down on this year. It's a huge focus area for us. I think, a challenge for us has been having so much data available, but how do you effectively use it? Because
Mm.
it can be overwhelming in terms of, well, I think a lot of people will probably have, you've got data coming from your CMS, you've got data coming from your email service provider, if you've got membership or subscription, you're getting data from there. And for most people, it's just overwhelming to think of all the different data points, never mind like actually using them in an effective way. So we're sort of, we're looking at data this year very much, and like, how do we get all of our data into one place, and how do we use it as an effective strategy? I think, thinking about AI in that, a lot of that is around predictive modeling. So
Hmm.
things like churn prediction, propensity to subscribe, all of those sort of data elements are really important for us. So yeah, as I say, it's a huge focus for us this year. Um, and then, as you mentioned, you can't go anywhere without hearing about AI. And look, again, for us, it's sort of on the commercial side, I think a lot of it is using AI to improve productivity, but then also things like personalization is huge for us. we want people to engage with our content, and we believe if we show them recommendations and things like that that are most relevant to them, they're more likely to engage. Now, there are obviously pitfalls with that. You don't want to just create this echo chamber where someone's only hearing about one thing because you've decided this is what they're interested in. So it's a balance between, using AI and tech to drive recommendations, drive personalization, but also make sure that you're showing people a diverse range of content and products.
I think it's really interesting the data point. Obviously, I think a lot of news brands are on the same page in terms of we have data everywhere. What are we looking at? When it comes, obviously, your focus being relationships, and you've got all of this data. How is the editorial team dealing with this? Like, how do you link, DMC, the conversations happening, what you're learning about your community to that editorial so that they know where to go next?
So we have a team that provides a daily data memo. So that's like just highlights from what content has performed well, what topics are resonating with our readers, and then based off of that, some recommendations or suggestions on what the editorial team could look to cover more, things like that. So it's it's an amazing thing that they do, and I like our most successful journalists love this data memo, and for good reason. So you'll give sort of high level stats like monthly active users, the changes around that, sort of bit of behavior around membership and app usage, and then it's the top performing stories from the last day, or maybe a longer tail looking at the week as a whole, and then looking at what people sort of engage with it more depth than just page views. What was the greatest sort of time on page? Those sorts of things. And different publishers will have different metrics for how they are dealing with sort of engagement, in-story engagement. And then from there, our team will sort of say, okay, this story sort of performed better than we might have expected. There's perhaps more interest in this, or this might have been a missed opportunity to promote this article more. So it's just sort of providing some overall data, and then also like not forcing the editorial team to get insights themselves, but actually providing sort of actionable points for the editorial team, because I think not everyone on the commercial team is data focused. Definitely not everyone on the editorial team understands data. So bridging that gap in what they might understand by actually like, hey, this is the data, and this is what we think the data says, and providing some sort of easy actionable insights on that, I think is really helpful.
Absolutely. And what impact has increasing this audience engagement, and I mean active, I think DMC is a really interesting example of part of what you're doing, because there's probably more. What impact has that had on your organization's bottom line and loyalty, for example?
I think it's improved retention. At the end of the day, that's the key to a successful revenue strategy. If you've got a leaky bucket where everyone who you bring in is quickly falling out, then you're not going to be successful long term. And I think engagement and creating a real community has been crucial in us establishing good retention rates for our membership program. So yeah, and that obviously is the bottom line. So, and as I think I mentioned earlier, I didn't always necessarily see that sort of very direct relationship between engagement and retention, but looking at it, I've sort of grown to appreciate that more, and I really think people should focus on that as engagement being the first step in retention. So yeah, that would be it.
I admit that might have been the answer to my last question. Unless there's something else that you would like to share with us about everything that you're doing engagement-wise before I ask the last one.
What is the last question? And then I'll see if there's something else to add.
The last question is, if you were going to give advice or maybe a hack to another news brand that is trying to focus on their engagement journey or their efforts, what would that hack or piece of advice be?
I think it would be to start simple and start at the beginning. One of the most effective and important engagement pieces we have is our onboarding journey. So we have an onboarding journey for someone who registers with us on our site. We have one for our membership program. So if you sign up to become a Maverick Insider, you'll start off on a 9-step onboarding journey. And that onboarding
9.
journey, hopefully not too many, but it's over 3 months, so it's extended. But that sort of that it'll start off with a welcome mailer that comes from me that thanks people for joining. It gives sort of a high level view of some of the benefits that they get from being a member. And then we have sort of over at most every 3 days, generally once a week, they'll get a new mailer, either from a member of the Daily Maverick team, so our editor-in-chief, who will introduce themselves, just talk a little bit about their area of Daily Maverick, or it's about sort of a product that we know pushes people towards being sort of longer-term members. So our most loyal and engaged members, are subscribed to multiple newsletters. So it's like, this is the newsletters you can subscribe to. This is how you do it. Download the app. Again, it's something we know is an important engagement tool. Read the e-edition, come to our webinars. There's like a variety of different things. There's a check-in from me to sort of see how people are doing. And all of those things, I think they build the relationship with our members and also sort of tell them about the important products and services that are part of being a Daily Maverick member. And that's, it doesn't need to be a 9-step journey. You can work your way towards it. Start with one mailer and then work from there. So it doesn't have to be overwhelming. You can build on it as you go. But I think starting at the beginning of that journey with someone is really important.
I really love the fact that you're getting like authentic emails that are introducing the team. It feels that, I bet that feels so real. Do you have some that get opened more than others, out of curiosity, more than anything?
Yeah, for sure.
Like
I
mine.
think, well, there are definitely more, people who have very high name recognition within our team. And I'll be honest, we use that to our benefit. We will send a mailer to someone asking them to update their payment details, and it's written by our most popular journalist, and in her she has literally written the newsletter, and that's you do get huge engagement with that. So yeah, I think adding personality and again, it's say this is a community, and a community is not just like generic emails. This is the personalities behind the journalism. These are the people you're going to engage with, and it's important from the outset to introduce people to them.
Well, I absolutely love the mission. I absolutely love how your team are approaching their members and the membership. And thank you so much for sharing all of that with me. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks for the opportunity. It was great to chat.